So, hi everyone. As promised, I'm doing this little series called Artist's Block. The idea of the series is really to talk to some people who have really changed the landscape of block printing, who've evolved a signature style. And I begin my conversation with Ravi Kiran of Metaphor Racha, who's had quite an interesting career transition before he finally landed in the textile space. So Ravi, I believe you were an electronics engineer.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yeah. So, yeah, I
And
mean,
so how did the transition to textiles happen for you?
even when I was studying electronics, I used to match the diodes and the wires, the colors. The red has to go with the green and the blue has to go with the white, and I used to blow up the circuits. I think the color combination, I think the idea came from there, and I was always fascinated. My mom is pretty creative in the way she did a lot of handmade, handcraft things, crochet, and all kinds of stuff at home. So I grew up like that. And for a long time, I grew up with my grandparents. My grandfather was a Gandhian. So a lot of influence came from him. And textile was an obvious choice. So slowly got into it. I mean, I worked in a garment factory and then I got into making my own clothes. So my journey has always been reverse. I was a merchandiser, then I was a producer of the garments, and then I got into pattern making, then I got into textile, I got into how to print and embroidery. Now I've gone back to cotton, how to grow cotton. So it's absolutely reverse the journey.
That's interesting. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we are going to talk about, where you are currently in a bit. But I think for starters, I do want to focus on Metaphor Racha and, the kind of interesting prints you've done. And Metaphor Racha started, if I'm not mistaken, in 2011, right?
Correct, yeah,
So
yeah.
technically speaking, in the vast and really ancient space that is block printing, you're quite the young Turk. And
Hmm.
yet you have developed in a span of say 10 years a very, very distinctive block printing style. So how did this style evolve, and what are the elements that you would identify as your style?
A lot of my friends know that I'm very scared of colors. Uh, so I never wanted to get into block printing at all.
Although the diodes and the anodes won't agree, but never
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. So, so I never wanted to get into block printing. I got into it only because we started weaving 100 counts handspun and hand woven fabric in Karnataka, which was dead and gone long time back. Around 11 years back when we started, we also wanted to work with a particular weaver who wanted it to work like that. So when we started weaving that fabric, we realized that we don't have a skill set to dye the yarn. 100 counts yarn cannot be dyed in Karnataka. We still don't have it. Because we wanted to encourage the weaver, we said, okay, just keep making Kora fabric. And the fabric came out so beautifully, and it was so thin that we could not make a garment out of it. And the obvious choice was like we have to convert that into sari if we have to sell the fabric. If we have to sustain that one particular weaver, we have to print it and make it into a sari. That's the best way we can go about it. So that's how the whole block printing came into picture. And while we were thinking of printing, as we all know, there is no new language for block printing as of now. There is a Bagru, then there is a Ajrak, and then there is a Kalamkari. There's a whole lot of block printing which is done here in India. But it's a very, what we call it as a traditional set of skill set and block printing which we have. There is no new language as such. Of course, there's people tree and people like that who have done a fantastic job. Uh, but we lacked a certain kind of a language. So that is when we started seeing what we can be doing with block printing. Now, our understanding of traditional and contemporary is very different. For example, if you go to Bagru and if you see some of the block printing there, you will see a lot of paisley or a lot of mangoes in the printing, and it's a beautiful border. Like you'll have a kind of a tendril, and then you have mangoes on both sides, perfectly aligned and all that. But rarely you see a mango being grown on a creeper. Yeah, you don't see that at all in nature. There are a lot of things which you don't see in the nature the way it has been predicted, seen in the block printing. Now, thousands of years back, somebody must have actually thought like, how do I use this nature, what I see around, into a block making, block printing craft? Now that idea is extremely contemporary. It's not traditional at all because you don't see that in nature. Yeah, I see that as a very, very contemporary craft. It's not traditional at all for me. Now, on the hindsight, like for example, the sari what you're wearing is doodled. This idea came like how children, like a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, actually sit and start doodling something which you don't even think too much, and you use it from your own hand, and you draw something which is extremely you. Is a very traditional way of going about drawing. It's not contemporary at all. Yeah. So this way of looking at what is traditional and what is contemporary started off with this whole doodling idea of, can we doodle a cow, can we doodle a flower, can we doodle a peacock, can we doodle, what all, house. It could be a stripes, it could be a checks, because when we use a traditional block maker, it is so precision. The line has to match, the checks has to fit into place, and then the Buddha has to fall into this pattern. We wanted to see whether we can actually get away from all that. So that is one language which we have, like a doodled effect of the block printing which we have. The other set is what we saw is unknown block maker. That is, we collected hundreds and hundreds of old wooden blocks, which is damaged, which is broken, which does not have a set properly, but highly skillfully carved. So that is something which we use also, in the metaphor China design philosophy. So we have not got into actually making any new blocks. It is all the blocks which is broken, which we use. That is one language, and the other language is what you see here as a lot of doodled blocks. And I also feel that what we do today as a contemporary would be traditional in 50 years down the line.
So, but while on one hand you said you use a lot of older blocks, and that's also a very interesting process of being able to repurpose something that is seen as damaged by others. But for stuff like this, like the sari I'm wearing, these are obviously new blocks that you created. So you obviously also have had to train block makers who would be able to execute these rather wild doodle blocks for you, right? So how did that process happen?
We don't have too many block makers here in Karnataka. In Bangalore, we don't have. There are a couple of them who have actually migrated from Bihar and West Bengal. Okay. So those guys are there here. So they're extremely skillful. But then when you, what we did was, when we first approached them to make this block, they found that ये नहीं होगा हमसे, ऐसा कोई नहीं करता है, या आपने कुछ पेपर में लिख के लेके आ गए तो हम कर सकते हैं क्या, all that. And you won't believe that when these people said we won't, they don't want to do this block, we went to the seal, like our signature, the seal, GST seal. So we went to that person and we got the entire seal of all these blocks. It was a plastic and rubber. And when we started printing with this rubber stamp, and then we went back to the block maker and they said, see, this is my rubber stamp and this is what the sari looks like. And it was not very precise, because the kind of precision which a block maker can bring, rubber stamp cannot bring. And we had to convince him that, saying that, we really want you to do this because we don't want to go to this plastic and rubber stamps because it does not serve anybody's purpose. Yours are mine. And that's how he got convinced. And from that day onwards, we started making wooden blocks. It was a challenge to start with. Yeah.
So what about the designing? Do you sort of create all the designs yourself, or do you have a team working with you?
No. When we started Metaphor Racha, I used to have an ex-partner. His name is Chandrasekhar. He lives in Bangalore. So he and me, both of us, we used to do like most of the animals and birds is what he has doodled. A lot of leaves and geometry and flowers, things like that is what I have doodled.
So you said, okay, so you do the blocks locally. What about the rest of it? The yarn, the the spinning of the fabric, the final printing. Is everything done in Karnataka? Does it go out
Yes,
anywhere
yes.
else?
No. So that's one thing. Metafracha has always support the state, Karnataka state. We have just kind of marked ourselves inside and we don't go out at all. So my work at Metafracha starts from the sliver stage. That the sliver is which looks like a wick, cotton wick. It starts from there. I work in 4 to 5 khadi sanghas where they have both spinning and weaving facility. So the yarn, the sliver comes to that, and then the ambara charaka spinning is done. It's a 6 spindle or 8 spindle charaka, and it is locally spun. 32 counts is where it is done in a place called Shirahatti and Kotturu. These are two villages. If you need a 56 counts fabric, then you need to go to Belur, and if it's 100 counts, then it is Keru. These are the kind of places we work. And here, both the spinning and the weaving happens. And once the fabric is done, it comes to Bangalore. If you're talking about sari, then it goes for a washing. Now, what you're wearing is actually reactive dye, azo-free printing. Not many people do this. This is actually the reactive dye comes in a powder format. You mix an edible gum into that. You know that the gum which we use to make sweets and all that. So yeah, that's the gum which we mix and make it into a very thick paste, and then you print on the sari. Once you print on the sari, it has to dry very well. Then you roll it in a newspaper, and these saris are steamed like idli for 6 hours. Yeah, so it has to be steamed for 6 hours. So only when you steam it, the gum comes off the sari, and only the dye remains on the fabric. So that's a long process. Yeah, so that is how the printing is done. So this is called reactive dye printing. So once it is printed, it goes for a heavy wash, and then it's ironed and it's ready to sell. That's how it is.
It's interesting because, I mean, everyone now in the fashion space is suddenly talking about being sustainable, being organic and eco-friendly. It's all become buzzwords. But, the whole concept of Metaphor Racha and what you started out and what you've, sort of remained true to from the start is all of this. So, they sort of represent the ethos of your work. So how do you ensure that what you do stays true to nature?
We have come up with a kind of a fabric. It's a jute outside, and there's a small lining of a plastic inside. And we normally ask the customer to reuse it. In fact, our packaging, you can use it to pot a plant. That's how we say. You can put a soil in it and you can grow. It's a water resistant and it's a nice resistant. And also, a lot of people don't realize, because we sell on a website, a lot of people from abroad, they buy from me, and the packaging has to be rodent proof also, because when it goes to the airport, especially Bombay, apparently there's a lot of rodent problem. I've heard from the post office. So it is not only waterproof, it has to be rodent proof, even if it is an interior. So we have to think a lot of things before actually looking into this packaging. And our packaging passes all the tests. And we have been using in the last 7 years, and we don't have a problem with that. So yeah, it's not, I won't say it's 100% plastic free, but then you can please reuse it enough number of times. So that's the best thing which is available right now. Just because it is brown, carton box, it's not green. We don't use the word sustainable because I'm still in the process of understanding the word, what sustainability means. So I don't use it anyway. We use a word saying sustainable way of working for a craftsman. So that's what we do. We have been working with the same same number of people, same institution for the last 11 years. So I think we have sustained their work and sustained ourselves and people around us. Our tailoring unit is in Bangalore, next to my house. So we have sustained them also in the last 11 years. So yeah, sustained way, that is true. And organic, the way we approach the work has been organic, not necessarily a cotton. Yeah. I have seen a lot of brands where the cotton is organic and the rest of the work isn't. So we don't have, I have a small studio where there's no AC. We don't switch, we have LED lights, we don't switch on the lights because we have huge windows. We don't have, there are a lot of things. I mean, our sewing machines is not electrical, so it is manually done. So every single thing we look into, like always to how organic the approach can be.
So, Ravi, you talked about Bagru, for example, and Dabu, etc. So, these are all age-old techniques of block printing. You're working in the same space. Has it ever occurred to you to think about, drawing inspiration or learning from those, craft styles and infusing them into the kind of block printing work that you do?
Yeah, so when I went to Pedana, it was very interesting because I mean, the skill is tremendous. The kind of a skill which they hold is tremendous, and the knowledge of understanding of natural dye is unbelievable. And also the kind of a block making. What really drew me to Pedana was the craft of block making. I think by far, Pedana has one of the best block makers in India. I mean, I have not come across anyone who's like that. I mean, the way they, if you put two blocks together, I mean, you won't even see the joint in between. So the skill is like so high. And their joinery is very different. I don't know how to tell you, but you can't make out. There is a particular leaf which will extend it to the next block. You see it very rarely. So that skill really is important. And they had very old blocks. Some of the blocks which was probably printed in V&A museum or things like that. So that drew me to Pedna. So even there, I don't go and say, okay, bhaiya ye kar do, wo border yahan pe dal do, wo butta wahan pe dal do. It's not about that. It's about understanding how what do they think about designing? What were they doing 30 years back? Is there something which they want to make again? Like, for example, when I went to Bagro, I realized that this block printer wanted to print a particular design for a long time, but he never had a choice because nobody wanted it. So I said, Bhaiya, wo design mujhe bahut acha hai, but aajkal koi nahi print karta hai. So I said, okay, fine, let's do it. So it's about that also. It is about, if you don't give the creative freedom to the people, then it is just, you're treating them as a laborer and it's just a drudgery. You have to make them understand, how do you even tell them, okay, what is creative, see, also you have to understand that we come from a place where we are highly educated, we have Pinterest, we have Instagram, so our design influences are quite high. I mean, we read and we go to museums and all that. But a person who's in a small village, I think the design comes from a very pure place. Yeah, so it comes from really pure place. So that's how you deal with it. And when we went to Bagru also, I realized there is nothing called Bagru print actually. It's a wrong name. It's wrong to call it as a Bagru print. There is Dabu, there is Sahi Begar, there is Jahota, there is different kinds of print which happens there. And it has a specific name and a purpose for it. Bagru happens to be a small town. But what happens when you say Bagru print, any print which is done in Bagru is Bagru. It could be chemical, it could be screen print, it could be digital, as long as it is done there. So that is something which we actually, when we came back in 2019, we started telling consumers saying, you please say it as a Jahota, you please say it as a dog, you see it as a, Syahi Baker, and not necessarily Bagru print. Even in Bagru, the kind of what I saw was very interesting was the coordination, the block maker, the washerman, the printer, the person who sells the starch, the person who sells the dye, the person who sells the gum, the dabu person, they're all different people. It is so beautiful because they all have to come together in sync to make that one side. Otherwise, it simply won't work. And also, we realized while we are printing with these printers, you realize, when you put a sari on a table, it's a very two-dimensional, 2D. Yeah. But when you wear it, it's a 3D. One thing which I really understood from the many traditional block printers is their understanding of which print will come where when it is worn. It's a phenomenal thing because we treat saris like an art piece, like put it here and put it there, and kuch bhi chalta hai, kind of a thing. But they have a very precise understanding that pallu has to be this, and if somebody was 5'4", the pallu will stop on the shoulder, and the border has to be this, and when the border is wider, make the body a little smaller butta. Their understanding is very unique and very interesting. That is something which I think I learned from all these people. I try to adapt as much as possible here. Yeah.
I come from the IP space where when I look at creations, we're trained as lawyers to look at them in the silos of, this is the creator and this is their work. And yet, every person I talk to in the textile space, the same thing I'm hearing from you as well, that, when something is truly collaborative, can you really say that one person at the end of the day owns it, so to speak? And if that were so, ultimately, the identifiable part of a garment, a block printed garment, is the motif. And so, it's always the ownership of a motif that one struggles with. And I see, the very interesting statement you've made in relation to your latest Kasuti collection, where you say that you don't want to assert IP over it and everyone's free to draw from it. But, the degrees of inspiration will be the determinant ultimately, whether someone is copying or whether they're only choosing to be inspired by it. So how do you think about, about IP and its intersection in the textile space?
In fact, there are so many people involved in this. In another 1 or 2 months, I think maybe some from October, none of the Racha product will have a label, because we feel that there are so many people, 17 to 18 hands, which has actually come together. And if you are buying it from me, you already know where it is coming from. And beyond that, it does not serve any purpose. Whatever I know today is not something which is inborn. I have learned from a lot of people. And it is also my responsibility to let others also know what I do and how I do. It's very important. Instead of copying design, I think I wish they copy how the businesses are done, how we collaborate with artisans. If one copies that, that'll be very helpful. Yeah, so nothing is meant. It's meant for everyone.
Thank you, Ravi. On that beautiful note, I'd like to end today's interview. Thank you very much. It was an absolute joy listening to you.